HBAR's mainnet just changed, and this is not one of those tiny technical updates that only developers need to care about. This is the start of a much bigger shift, and on the surface, it sounds boring. Record streams, block streams, version 0.75, stage 1 cutover, wrapped record blocks. That does not sound like the kind of thing that's going to be moving markets, right? But that is exactly why we actually need to pay attention here, because sometimes the biggest moves in crypto, they do not start with a giant green candle. They start with the plumbing. They start with the boring engineering. They start with the network quietly changing how data moves underneath the entire system. And if you hold HBAR, or you are watching Hedera for real enterprise adoption, this right here, it matters. Because the question, it is not just, did Hedera upgrade, right? The real question, it is this. Did Hedera just lay the foundation for a cheaper, cleaner, more enterprise-ready data layer? And if it did, then what happens when the businesses that need predictable infrastructure begin to see Hedera not just as a speculative chain, but as a place where serious value can actually live? Now that is the mystery today. It's not hype, not a moon boy fantasy, a mainnet change, a new data architecture, and possibly, at least the possibility that HBAR's next major story is not about retail excitement at all. It is going to be about cost, it's going to be about trust, and it's going to be about whether enterprise value can be trapped on the ledger once the rails are strong enough to carry it. Okay, so to understand why this matters, we need to go back to what Hedera has been using until now. You see, for years, Hedera's network output has relied on something called record streams. Now, you've got to think of record streams as the receipts of the network. See, when transactions happen, the network produces files that show what happened, what the result was, and how the system moved forward. Right, mirror nodes then read that data, they index it, and make it easier for explorers, applications, wallets, exchanges, and services to use. Now that system, it worked, but there is a difference between something that was working and something that is being ready for the next decade, right? Because enterprise infrastructure, it is not just about speed. Right, it is not just about low fees, and it is definitely not just about a nice looking chart. Now, enterprise infrastructure, it has to be easy to verify, it has to be easy to operate, and it has to reduce waste. It has to handle more data without forcing every participant to carry even more and more weight forever. And this is where the old model, it starts to look a little limited. Right, under the older setup, Hedera had multiple output streams, record streams, event streams, signature files, sidecars, different pieces of the network story moving through different formats. Now, for builders, operators, and data consumers, that can actually mean more complexity, right? More moving parts, more places where something has to be stored, checked, synced, and understood. Now, with the July 2026 version 0.75 mainnet upgrade, Hedera begins stage 1 of the cutover. Now that does not mean that the old system is going to disappear overnight. That is rather important. Stage 1 is simply the bridge, right? Wrapped record streams begin streaming through block nodes, while record file consumers, they are not meant to be disrupted at this stage. So the network is not ripping out the floor while people are actually still standing on it. Right? It is building a new floor that's actually sitting underneath it. And that is where this story gets particularly interesting, because in crypto, people often get excited when something launches, right? But serious infrastructure usually arrives in layers. First, the rail appears, then operators test them, then the network kind of shifts the traffic, then the old way becomes less important. Then, almost suddenly, the market looks back and says, wait, when did that foundation change? So, here is my first question for you. If this is only stage 1, are most HBAR holders underestimating what the second stage could actually mean? You can let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Okay, so here is the deep dark hole in this video. See, most people, they talk about adoption as if it is only about demand. They ask which company is using it. They ask how many transactions are happening. They ask when will price catch up. Now, they are very fair questions, but they do miss something underneath it, right? Because big enterprise value, it can settle on a public or any public ledger. Right, the network has to prove that it can actually handle the boring parts better than everyone else. And the boring parts, they are pretty brutal, right? Data access, history, verification, operator cost, storage, network output, developer tooling, node economics. See, these are not sexy topics, right? But they can decide who survives, because if a network becomes expensive to operate as it grows, well, that growth can become a bit of a problem. If every new wave of activity adds more burden to the people running the infrastructure, well, adoption starts to look less like progress and more like pressure. See, that is the flawed system that Hedera is actually trying to move away from. Not because record streams were a failure, but because the next version of Hedera has to be built for a world where users are not only crypto traders. They are talking, or at least we are talking about, businesses, banks, supply chains, tokenized assets, stablecoin rails, identity systems, carbon markets, gaming infrastructure, AI data verification, and yes, potentially Fortune 500 grade use cases where the network is not being used for a weekend experiment, but as part of a real operational flow. Now, that kind of usage, it actually depends on messy data access, or it cannot depend on messy data access because it cannot be hard to verify, right? It cannot be needlessly heavy. So block streams, they come in as a cleaner model. Instead of multiple streams telling different parts of the story, Blockstream aims to merge network outputs into one signed block format. Transactions, results, consensus events, state changes, all packaged into a clearer stream of verifiable network history. And that really does matter because the data layer is not just a developer feature, it is the evidence layer. It is how the outside world sees what is happening. And when the outside world includes regulated institutions, service providers, auditors, exchanges, and enterprise applications, the evidence layer becomes part of the financial thesis. And this is where HBAR holders really do need to slow down, because price, it can ignore this for quite a while. The market can sleep all the way through it. Retail can look at the chart and feel like nothing is happening, right? But underneath the hood, Hedera may be reducing the friction in the exact place that the long-term adoption needs it the most. Okay, now I do have to pause here for just a quick second to let you know that I'm not a financial advisor, right? This video, it is for informational and educational purposes only, right? The crypto market, it is volatile and you could genuinely lose everything that you've invested. So it's very important that you do your own research because at the end of the day, your money, it is your responsibility. Now, let's get back to the video here. Right, the most important part about this upgrade, it might not be the headline, it might be the cost curve. Because if Hedera wants more nodes over time, and if it kind of wants broader participation, then operator costs are going to matter an awful lot. So if running network infrastructure is too heavy, the system naturally favors fewer, larger players. Now that can be a bit of a problem. But if data can be streamed more cleanly, if mirror node operators can consume what they need more effectively, and if block nodes become a better source for recent and historical network data, then the burden may come down over time. Now that is the thesis here. It's not a guarantee, of course. It is just a thesis. Lower operating friction can support a healthier network. A healthier network can support more serious demand. More serious demand can make the larger ledger more attractive to enterprise users. And enterprise users, they do not want drama. They want predictability. They want records. They want proof. They want systems that do not break when activity rises. You see, this is why the July 2026 version 0.75 upgrade, it matters even though it is not the full cutover yet, right? It begins with the shift. It starts moving wrapped record blocks through block nodes. It gives the ecosystem a path to adapt before the larger September 2026 move. You see, when block streams are expected to become the kind of, output format going forward, see, that's going to be the key here, right? It means that the main source of truth, the default output, the primary network history feed. So July is the warning light. September is the bigger door. And if you are only watching the price today, you may miss the fact that the network is preparing for a different kind of user tomorrow. See, that is kind of where the villain in this story becomes a bit clearer, right? The villain, it's not a chain, it's not a person, it's not even the market makers that keep annoying everyone on the chart, right? The villain here, it is friction. Friction in data, friction in cost, friction in proof, friction in operations. The friction is what keeps enterprise value from staying on chain. Because businesses, they do not care about a passionate community or how passionate a community is if the infrastructure is just too hard to run, hard to verify, or hard to depend upon. See, Hedera is attacking that friction directly, quietly, technically, and in a way that most of the market will probably ignore until the rails are already live. So let's talk about the phrase that matters the most, trapping enterprise utility value on the ledger. Now that sounds aggressive, but the idea, it is simple. If a company builds on a network because it is cheap, fast, reliable, and easy to verify, then leaving that network, it becomes harder over time. This is not impossible, of course, but it's going to be harder because once systems connect to a ledger, workflows, they form around it. Data history builds, operational habits build, partners connect, compliance processes adjust, internal teams learn the tools, APIs get wired in, auditors get used to the evidence, and suddenly the ledger is not just a place where transactions happen. It becomes a part of the business process. Now that is the kind of value that HBAR holders are really watching for. Not one viral announcement, not one partnership headline, but real stickiness, right? The kind where utility does not just disappear for a week or just appear for a week and then vanish forever, right? The kind where the use cases, they stay because leaving costs more than actually staying. Now, block streams, they may matter here because they strengthen the base layer for that kind of stickiness. If the network outputs become easier to consume and to verify, well, more services can then start building around it. And if block nodes improve access to the network data, the ecosystem can become easier to operate. If state changes and transaction results are packaged in a more complete way, the network history, it becomes more useful. And if the data layer improves, the financial thesis, it changes from will people speculate on HBAR to can Hedera become a place where real-world value keeps moving because the infrastructure makes sense? See, that is a very different question. And it is the question that long-term holders should be asking, because crypto markets, they are noisy. One day everyone is euphoric, the next day everyone is convinced that the project is dead. But infrastructure does not care about your mood. It either improves or it does not. And on this front, Hedera is moving. July 2026, it is not the finish line, it is the start of a handover, right? The old record streams begins sharing the road with the new blockstream path. By September 2026, if the timeline holds, well, the network moves towards the bigger shift, And that means that everyone watching Hedera has to decide whether they are looking at a random technical release or the early stages of the most important and serious infrastructure reset. But here is my second question for you guys. If enterprise adoption depends on lower friction, stronger proof, and cleaner data access, is this upgrade more important than the market is actually giving it credit for? You can let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. So, what should we make of all of this? Well, first, we should be honest about it. Right? This upgrade is not going to mean that HBAR is going to explode tomorrow. It does not mean that every enterprise suddenly floods the network next week. And it does not mean that the market will instantly understand what has changed. See, crypto, it rarely works that cleanly. But it does mean that Hedera is changing the machinery underneath the main net. And that machinery, it matters, right? Stage 1 of the July 2026 version 0.75 cutover, it introduces wrapped record blocks through block nodes. That is the bridge, right? The bigger September 2026 version 0.77 cutover is expected to actually bridge the stronger shift, where block streams become the kind of only network output format, and the new data architecture becomes the default, right? So today, the headline is kind of simple, right? HBAR's mainnet, it just changed. But the deeper story, it is much bigger, right? The network is preparing to move from a heavier, older output models into a cleaner, block-based stream for verifiable data. Now that could help mirror node operators. It could support better access to the network history. It could reduce friction for builders and data consumers. And over time, it could make Hedera more attractive for the kind of enterprise use cases that need proof, reliability, and lower operational drag. See, that is the financial thesis. It's not price hype, it's infrastructure first, value second, market recognition last. And this is why moments like this can be so uncomfortable for holders, because when the chart is not rewarding you, the only thing that you can really judge is whether the network is getting stronger. Is the infrastructure improving? Are the rails becoming easier to use? Is the system preparing for a more serious demand? Is Hedera building something that can handle real enterprise pressure? Because if the answer is yes, then this is not just a technical update. It is a signal. It's a quiet one, a boring one, the kind that the market loves to ignore until the numbers start showing up later. And that is the choice in front of every HBAR watcher right now. You can look at the version 0.75 and see just another developer release. Or you can look at the deeper and see stage 1 of a much bigger handover, from record streams to block streams, from scattered outputs to cleaner proof, from legacy data paths to a more enterprise-ready foundation, and maybe, just maybe, from a market that is tired of waiting to a network that has been preparing the rails before the demand arrives. For now though, be sure to smash that like button for me, subscribe if you are new, and check out the video that is queued up on the screen. I will see you all over there.